NAS storage, which then you're saying storage twice, but that's okay. We've got a little bit of a mix-up with a couple of the panelists, but I'm going to try my best to carry this with Alexander and I for the second hour today. So we may end up doing a NAS redo, but we'll see how she goes. So basically, the idea is you've got a hard drive that's accessible on your network. And in the past, it was a lot slower to have that. Not a lot of us had a wired connection into a storage box in our home. 10 gigabit networking wasn't a thing yet, so there wasn't a good way to get at that data. But in recent years, more and more companies like Synology or like TerraMaster have come into the market, and even Ugreen, who I used to just see as being a dongle maker, right, or an adapter maker, or a cheap camera thing that you get on Amazon. At NAB this year, back in April, they had a NAS out. So it seems like everyone is trying to get in on this network-attached storage space. And what it allows for me in a home use is that regardless of what computer I'm using, is it the Mac Mini, is it the Mac Studio, is it my MacBook Pro, I can get at that data. And what I really like about it is that I have it set up as almost like a cloud receiver. In Synology, I set up this thing called Cloud Station where I can configure my Dropbox, my Google Drive, my Microsoft OneDrive, and anything that I put in to Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, you name it, it creates a local copy of that back at the home base. So if I'm out and about and I don't have terabytes and terabytes of storage on my local machine to have all my data with me at all times, that's not a big deal. I can always just have, as long as I have an internet connection, I can pull it down from the web. But I don't have a local copy of it. I don't have a copy of it that if I don't have access to the internet or I don't have time to download terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data, then I'm kind of out of luck. Or if I need to edit video files between multiple machines, if I have a Final Cut project and I'm working on it on 2 different computers, I can have that Final Cut library or that Lightroom library. If I'm using Lightroom Classic, I can have all of my photos on there. I actually don't use it a lot for movies. Ryan Thomason was teasing me in the chat, and he said that that's where you store all your movies. I've been buying most of my movies on iTunes for a long time, which has been nice because it keeps upgrading over the years. But the thing that does get me is photos. I have, probably 2.5 terabytes of photos, over 100,000 that I've taken over the years. And to carry that around on one machine is, you end up needing a really, really big hard drive, but also I'll end up having some nervousness about it not being backed up in one place. So most of my perspective from this comes from the Synology point of view and what I've set that up at home. And I can, after we take a look at a couple questions, I can walk you through how I have that set up and give you kind of a preview of what that disk station manager software looks like. And I also know Alexander wanted to throw in on this. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, it's been I'm actually looking for a new NAS solution because I haven't had one in a long time. In fact, and this will date me a little bit, but I don't know if anyone remembers the company Drobo. Do you remember when they were around? Yeah. Well, I got the very first generation Drobo after hearing about it on TWIP because they were a sponsor. And it was such a cool product at the time. It just seemed kind of revolutionary. They had their own proprietary RAID thing, and they were touting that you could mix and match different manufacturers. And typically in the past, they always recommend that you would stick with the same size of drive for the entire NAS. And so it was really cool, and you could swap drives in it too. But I haven't had a solution in a while, and I'm getting to the point now where I need one because now I'm doing a lot of video production, and I keep running out of space, and I've got all these separate storage drives. Like I've got NVMEs and all in these tiny little enclosures and all that sort of stuff. So I really need a better solution. I do use offsite backup, but I need something where I can store for a little bit longer term, larger projects. So that's something that I'm looking into right now, and I'm looking at Synology. But I just wanted to say too that we should probably point out and differentiate the different reasons why someone would get a NAS, because you have NAS solutions that are that are affordable, that are great for just storing and backing up stuff, but you're not going to be able to edit on those in real time. They're not fast enough. So there are different solutions at different price points, some that have gigabit connections, some that have 10 gig connections that are on a whole other level where you can, for example, if you have a team of editors, you need something that's going to have enough throughput on the network to be able to edit in real time, and that's another consideration.
Yeah, and if you have files that are extremely large ProRes files that you're trying to put into whatever your NLE is, and you're trying to edit those, you have to think about, okay, how much data am I trying to move through a pipe at any given time? And not only how fast is the hard drive, is it an SSD or is it a spinning disk? But the other part is, how big is the pipe that it's trying to go through? If you have just a 1 gigabit LAN on the back of your NAS, then you're going to be running at less than speeds that you would have had on USB 3. And you can have a RAID, an SSD RAID on one of those Thunderblades from OWC that's a direct attached storage plugged right into your machine, and then you're going to have a very performant, very responsive device. If I was doing any sort of project, I would have the project files, everything's backed up to that network attached storage. But if I'm actually working with it, I want to make sure that it is my exact machine, that it's directly attached to my computer, because I don't want to be dealing with any sort of network latency. One of the things that I do like about the Synology, I have two. I have a 4-bay and a 5-bay. The 1522 Plus has 5 bays, and it has a little slot in the back that you can purchase for an additional fee. Everything's for a fee. You can purchase an additional 10 gigabit NIC for the back of it. That way you get better throughput. Now you have to make sure that all of your network infrastructure can support that. But now you've gone ahead and really widened the pipe and made it possible to use that for lower resolution. If you're doing a 1080 project, not a 4K project, maybe that you're going to have better luck than if you're only on a 1 gig NIC. The other part of it is you can also, with the 1522, there are 2 NVMe slots on the bottom of that machine. So if you flip that enclosure over and then take the bays off, you can just plug in 2 NVMEs. And now you can have really, really fast local storage in there, or a fast cache that can make that device more performant on the network.
CJ, can you share the model of that? Like, what price point are we talking about to get that kind of functionality?
So if you're on let's take a look here. So if I'm on a disk station 1522 Plus, you're going to have to bring your own hard drives. And when you are bringing hard drives, a good recommendation is to make sure that you're not that you have more than one manufacturer of drive. Like if I have a 20 terabyte drive, you're going to have one is from Seagate and then one is from Western Digital or something like that. Because if you buy 2 of the same model hard drive at the same time, the odds are that they were made at the same time. And if those hard drives were made at the same time, then there was an issue in the factory at that point in time, then you might have an issue where where they had an issue in the factory, and now you have both of your drives failing. And most of you can set your fault tolerance within the RAID configuration of, is it going to have 1 that can fail, or is it going to have 2 that can fail? But you're balancing that with storage considerations all the time. The 1522 Plus is $700, and here's what it looks like. If I can, my Stream Deck is gone to sleep, so I cannot switch to it very easily, but give me just a second. I don't know if you can look that up. It's the 1522 Plus.
Do you have any thoughts on enterprise grade drives that are branded as NAS quality drives?
For sure.
What exactly does that mean? Yeah,
so what that means is you have I think Western Digital Red and Seagate Iron Wolf are 2 of the popular brands. And when you buy an enterprise NAS grade drive, the reason for that is it's designed to be on all the time. It's designed to be spinning all the time. If it's a consumer grade hard drive, think about an external hard drive that you buy. It's not plugged into the computer all the time, let alone running all the time. So how much they're going to reduce the tolerances that they're going to allow in the manufacturing process, and it's going to be designed to be hit a little bit harder. But the way that this looks like, if I'll switch to it here, the way that this looks is you've got, this is the disk station 1522 plus. This is the one that I have. And the things that I like about it, again, you can put 2 NVMEs here on the bottom, but you can also go ahead and on the back side, there is a SATA port. You can see it there. And you can actually daisy chain additional expansions onto this. So I think it's 5 drives by default, but you can go ahead and expand that, I think, with 2 additional and take that up to 10. So that's a pretty big deal because, and again, I only have experience with Synology, but one of those things that attracts me to it is the fact that I can keep expanding the storage and expand the storage pools. To show you a little bit of what that looks like, I mean, it actually has a little tiny Linux, a little tiny version of Linux that's running right on it. So if I go back to my computer here, so here is the Synology NAS, and I can see in the upper left here, I've got here are all the applications that can run on it. So you can run it as a media server in your house. You can run it just as I like just using as a file server, but you could even run Office applications here and host a chat on it. So if I go into my storage manager, you can see that this is the smaller of the 2 Synologies that I have. I was doing some data recovery on the one, so it's in a little bit of a state right now where it's repairing. I don't think it's really going to take 10 days because it's gotten to 30% in just 2. But I was running a lot of other tasks that are affecting the default speed that's on it at the moment. But right now I have 2 18 terabyte drives and 1 12 terabyte drive that's in it. That's just giving me some redundancy at the moment. I'm actually upgrading from 12 terabytes to 18. And when you set this up, I use what's called the Synology Hybrid RAID. And that SHR, or Synology Hybrid RAID, is their proprietary format that allows for a little bit more flexibility. But much like the Drobo, which I'm like you guys, I heard the jingle, the Jeff Smith, put all of your stuff on a Drobo. And I bought one. And then I had issues with it, and it stopped working. And I lost a bunch of data, and it doesn't get supported anymore. It gave me pause, even when I was setting up the Synology, to use a non-standard RAID configuration, where I'd much rather use RAID 1, where it's just, hey, I've got a mirrored backup so that I have 2 18 terabyte drives. If one of them goes down, I still have all 18 terabytes of my data that's sitting there. So yeah, that's kind of the basic use that I have for it. Is I have it, all of my photos, so that my local Lightroom library is sitting on my local network. If I have a video projects that I've archived, I can put all of the raw media, all of the original media, all of the project files, not that I would actually work on them from the NAS, except maybe just after the fact to update a title or something like that. But really it's more for archive. And then I have it as a kind of a mirror for any of my cloud drives. I can go ahead and mirror those back to my local network so that I have an offline copy of that. So if at any point I didn't have access to the internet, I wasn't without all of those files. The last thing that I'll mention about my setup is that you can also use Synology will sell you a service to back it up online. So they have a C2 service that's similar to offerings by Backblaze and others, where it will create a virtual copy of your Synology up in the cloud. And that way, if anything goes wrong with all of your hard drives, you're okay. Oh, there is one more thing that I wanted to mention, and that's the package center that's in Synology. So if you're here in your Synology and you go to the package center, which is this icon right up here, this will show you all of the packages from Synology up at the top, where you can download the backup software, the notes engine, the Office products. You can enable exFAT drives so that you can even plug in a USB regular spinning hard drive and share that over your network. But here at the bottom is where you have the contributor ones. And the one that I want to point out is, besides you can run a Plex media server in your house, you also have Tailscale. So I can install Tailscale onto my NAS and now have that as part of my Tailscale group, and no matter where I am, I have access to that data. You can also do that with the Synology Quick Connect, but having it just be on your Tailscale network helps that you don't have to run it all the time. And then and one more thing before we get into questions is that you're not only you're not just limited to looking at your files through the file station manager within whatever that web interface in DSM or Disk Station Manager is online, you also have the ability to just look at it in the Files app. So like I have on my Mac, you can just hit Command-K and type in the IP address of your NAS, and then type in your username and password, and it just shows up like files and folders on your Mac. And that's how I access my my Lightroom library. But the other part of it is you can go and do the connect to server from your iPhone, or from your Mac, or from your iPad, and just hit connect to server, and then you have your Files app. So I just typed in the 192.168. Yada yada, whatever it is. And let me go to it right here. Yeah, having your Stream Deck crashed in the middle of the show has made it very interesting to switch. But here's my here's the iPad. And so just like on my desktop, I have all of my folders right here. So if I want to go into, I have it set up as a time machine on my local network. I could go into my home folder and see all of those different sync points for my Dropbox, for my OneDrive, for my Google Drive. And because it has an operating system that's running on it, it's connecting to that cloud without me asking for it. As soon as I make a change on Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive or any of those services, that synchronization automatically gets pulled down back to my local machine, or back to that network attached storage device, and then I don't have to think about it. So it's one of those things, after you've set it up, you don't have to do a whole lot of maintenance. But let's jump into the next questions, and I hope that I'll do my very best here. Alexander and I will cruise through these. We're running with a little bit of a light panel today, so I would also appreciate if anybody has ideas in the chat, we can bring those in as well.
Absolutely, and vote on them too. Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I have a 2-bay TerraMaster NAS. What are some ways I can back this up to the cloud just in case one of the drives fail?
Okay, so I don't have a TerraMaster, so I hope that I'm not leading us astray here. But if it's anything like the Synology, you can connect it to an offsite service. And Mickey says you can sync the NAS to a different NAS. So like Synology does this as well, where if you have, two different NAS appliances in two different locations, you can set them up so that they sync together, so that when you make a change on one, it remotely backs to the other. The other one that you can do is you can sync it to a service like S3, and that's what Mickey has in the chat there. TerraMaster also, according to Mark Steele in the chat, has a product called Cloud Sync that lets you sync to a variety of online services in order to make the backup. And I see the 2-bay NAS and I'm just like, oh, it's just the beginning. Before you know it, there's a 2-bay, there's a 4-bay, there's an 18-bay. It keeps growing from there. And I really like to overbuild these. If you're getting into your first solution and you think you need 10 terabytes, say, get 16, get 20, get 18, whatever it is. You want to overbuild this so that you have room to grow. The other thing that a lot of these network attached storage devices will support is versioning. So if you have a file that you're updating, then you can say, let me roll this back to what did it look like last week. Well, if you have just movie files on there, and the only thing that's changing is that instruction file, then that's easy, because versioning that instruction file doesn't take up a lot of space. If you start versioning video files and photo files, then that causes that storage to balloon, and you're just in the beginning. So I'm happy for you, Zach. That's really awesome. Next question.
From the QR code, Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois. We are working to upgrade our server to NextCloud. We have 10 terabytes TerraMaster NAS. Do I connect NextCloud to the TerraMaster NAS Master OS using the built-in TerraMaster configuration, or do everything in NextCloud by providing TM credentials? How best to protect the 14?
I have really I'm really wishing I had more than just one vendor of NAS now, because we're getting this 2 TerraMaster ones in a row. I'm not sure on how to transition it to NextCloud or using the configurator, but we may have to save this and do a NAS 2.0, a NAS redo. So we may have to bring that one back in. Sorry about that, Gene. Next question.
Another QR code question from Marielle Jusha, Miera, and Wablo. What is non-line storage? Can I connect a NAS to it, and how?
Go ahead, Alexander.
My understanding of non-line storage, well, first of all, anything that's not non-line storage would be something like a tape-based solution where data is written sequentially, and it is, it's written and read in order. So non-line storage would be any of the modern storage systems that we're all probably familiar with. So non-volatile RAMs, SATA drive, SSD drives, spinning hard drives, and really that's what we're talking about here.
And to roll it back a little bit, we don't usually do this, but I didn't have a good answer for Gene, and I feel bad. Mickey mentioned in the chat that to migrate using NextCloud tools. So if you have your TerraMaster that you're moving to NextCloud, NextCloud tools is the best place to start there. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks, how do I export a copy of my Google Photos and Apple Photos to my Synology Photos app?
So the couple ways to do this. The first way that I've done is actually to use I will use the photo sync you can get a mobile app for either your Android or your iPhone to sync your photos into Synology Photos as a backup. And then I just restored my Synology here, and it appears that I didn't actually put Synology Photos on it. So I'm going to install that right here. So when you go ahead and click install within the package center for Synology, the way that looks is that you've got, you hit download and it'll right here, or the little install button. I just click download and it's going to download in real time. And then it'll just come up with a little bug that'll allow you to install it. Now, I did have the Synology Photos configured within this image before I restored it recently, so it should have all my connections in there once it starts back up. So we'll just take a look and see how that goes. So now it just got finished downloading, and then let's have a peek at how this goes from here. If it's going to take too long, I may have to come back to that. But for me, I like to have it on the mobile app as opposed to, or I like to have it on the mobile app so that it's feeding back. I have not had good experience with, at least on the Apple Photo side, of having an automatic way to get that in there. Mickey says for Google Photos, go ahead and use Google Takeout to download a copy as opposed to, setting up a consistent sync. It is one of those things where even with Lightroom, like, it frustrates me because Adobe has Cloud Photos, Apple has Cloud Photos, Google has Cloud Photos. None of them have a great, easy way to get them off of the cloud into a folder structure that things other than a computer can understand. And I just want a nice, neat little package that was set up kind of the way Lightroom Classic used to be, where it was just, hey, this is the year that it was taken, this is the day that it was taken, and here are all the photos. And then there's a separate folder that has all the instructions with all of your non-destructive edits. But if Synology Photos comes back up here, I may come back to that because I hit download, but it has taken its sweet time because I have that storage pool repair running in the background, it's running a little bit slower. But next question.
Brian Stark in Nottingham is asking, I just upgraded my iPhone to iOS 18 and now my NAS is read-only from that device. Luckily, I didn't upgrade my iPads and they still read-write NAS OK. Did anything change with validation or permissions on iOS 18? Connection is via SMB. Thanks.
I have my... I connected to my Synology on my iPhone this morning. It was on iOS 18, and I think it could do read-write. It may have to do with oh no, you said it's an SMB connection. It may be helpful to either disconnect and reconnect that service from the iPhone to the with the connect to server, you may even remove it and re-add it, or restart the NAS. The other thing that I might do is you can actually go in and stop the SMB service and then restart it. But there isn't anything that's changed explicitly in the iPhone, to my knowledge. It may be first day jitters because it's our first week jitters, and hopefully they can update to get around that. But to my knowledge, there hasn't been a specific change in how the iPhone or how iOS, I should say, iOS and iPadOS utilize the SMB protocol that would cause that. But hopefully that gets fixed. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asked, has anyone ever built their own NAS using FreeBSD or Linux with ZFS? What case and motherboard would work best for said build?
So I've never built one from scratch, only because it scares me. There are plenty of things that I will hack around in software. Occasionally I'll hack stuff around in hardware, but really when it comes to data, I get really, really nervous. And I am extremely conservative on using tested solutions, reliable manufacturers, not only of the NAS hardware, but also the hard drives themselves. And I want it to be road tested by hundreds of thousands of people. Mickey said that he's used a chassis from InWin, and then the bare bones systems from Supermicro is his go-to. But what do you know, Alexander?
Yeah, I used to build computers once upon a time, and now I just don't have a lot of free time. So I think Mickey's suggestion is good. This is quite the rabbit hole to go down. I echo your thoughts, CJ, too, especially when it comes to data. Is how much is your time worth? I'm not saying like it's not fun. I mean, like we're all nerds here and we like messing around with stuff and rolling our own solutions. But for certain things like that, where it's critical for things to operate, unless you really know FreeBSD really, really well and you're willing to deal with it and manage it, I probably wouldn't go down that road.
Yeah, there's a very conservative, I'm sensitive to data loss because to some degree, you can't get it back. Even if I have a Synology that is set up with either the Synology Hybrid RAID or RAID 10 or RAID 5 or 6 or whatever the configuration that has that redundancy in it, I'm still nervous that there's anything that could go missing and anything go wrong. And we're not accumulating any less data with how large files we're getting. When it comes to a roll your own, you can definitely do it, but you've got to ask yourself, what's the mission? Where is this thing going? And then do I value the money that I'm saving, or do I value the time that I'm putting into it? And the last thing that I would consider is if you're just doing this for fun because you want to prove to yourself that you can do it. I've been in that situation too, where I have no reason to spend as much time as I'm doing something. I could easily afford to buy the purpose-built solution, but it's a hobby for a reason. I just enjoy it. Next question.
This one's for me. Is Synology still the most reputable option for a network-attached storage? I need more storage, and I want redundancy. I would like to build the most cost-effective RAID 6 NAS. Hot swapping would be nice as well.
You may be able to get a less expensive option from either a QNAP or TerraMaster. I've been more likely to get the Synology just because the user interface, the user interface and the way that they've set it up is a little bit more, I don't want to say idiot proof, but it's simpler. Like they have a lot of the lookout blocks so that you're not getting yourself into trouble. And for me, as having just gone through taking that, storage pool that was 2 12 terabyte drives and moving it up to 2 18 terabyte drives and messing it up. Like I made a mistake in the sequence of things that I did and thought that I was like, oh no, I've lost all my data because of how many people use Synology and because of how robust their support documents are for a beginner. It made it really easy to go through and say, okay, how do I get myself out of this jam? And it said, okay, get a fresh drive. I pulled a drive that was just laying around And I installed DiskStation Manager on there. I put in the 2 drives that I thought were gone, and it said, hey, we noticed these are in a degraded state. Would you like to try and rebuild them? It told me which drives I had to put in. I had to put in that one additional 12 terabyte drive in order to facilitate the recovery. And it took the better part of a week to do it, but that whole drive pool repaired. And then I made a mistake again, and I hit the wrong button, and that's why I'm still in a part of a rebuild. But all the data, before I had to do that, all the data could be backed up to an external source. So I'm back in the rebuild zone right now as I'm getting those storage pools figured out, but I'm not in a situation where I'm at risk of losing anything. And it's for that reason why I've kind of leaned Synology, because, nerdy as I am, I don't have the time to fuss with it if it's not going to be easy. And then reading from the chat again, Mickey also recommended for entry-level NAS Solutions a Synology. And Steve Uroff in Madison, Wisconsin says, he has hundreds of terabytes of Synology across 6 chassis. He keeps buying them. They've served him reliably. So for what it's worth, that's what I've got. You had one more thing to throw in, Alexander?
Yeah, just one question about the using something like a Synology system, because obviously these things have cooling fans in them. Can you run them in the same room that you're in? I don't know how noisy they are. I'm always concerned about noise.
The fans are not as noisy as the spinning drives, in my experience. When I moved into this room and I was actually getting ready for this show, I was setting up, to set up for this show, I decided that I was going to do 2 things. I was going to upgrade from my 12 terabytes to 18 terabytes for my storage pool, because I wanted to live that before I talked about it. And I also decided that I wanted to upgrade from the DS 420 Plus to the 1522 Plus. So I was going to go from a 4-bay NAS that maxed out at 1 gigabit Ethernet connections, move up to a 1522 that could take 5 bays and have the 10 gigabit Ethernet slot in the back. So I wanted to live all of those things in preparation for this episode. And when I went through all that, I had it in this room. It was too loud. But I constantly found it wasn't the fans. It was the click, 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 clicking of everything. And so I ended up moving them just back into the room that has the switches. It has the 10 gig line run right into the back of it. The one thing that I've found is I do like to go with one of those little with those little blowers and blow out the dust every once in a while, because it's not in a particularly dusty place, but those fans are running all the time, and they have kind of a little logo on the side that's like the Synology logo, but that's actually built into the vent. So as it's sucking in the air, all the dust starts to go on. So if I walk by the room where that's in and I look in and I can read the Synology logo from a couple feet away, I know that it's accumulated too much dust. It should just blend in, and I got to go and give it a clean. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama City says, I'm currently using UnRaid as my NAS solution and have shared folder for my Davinci projects. Has anyone done a do-it-yourself NAS for DavinciCloud and colab?
I haven't done a do-it-yourself NAS for DavinciCloud, but if I'm not mistaken, didn't Blackmagic have an appliance? I want to say it was $300 that would actually sync. Even if it wasn't a RAID, it would sync 2 hard drives together. Maybe I'm imagining this.
Yeah, I recall them. Yeah, I think they have a piece of hardware for that. Let me take a look.
But it's one of those things that if there's some way to have a package that syncs the 2 drives together for collaborative editing, I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. The only thing that I worry about is how well does it support multiple people editing the same project files at once. That's really, really tricky business. If you're just accessing the same original media set and then you're uploading render files, and then, editor 1 is going to work on it, and then later editor 2 is going to work on it, and separate, some of the NAS systems will support checking in and checking out files so that there's not simultaneous edits going on. But the big thing is, if you're looking for true collaboration, there might be a more purpose-built solution. And true collaboration, meaning simultaneous collaboration, you may be looking for a more purpose-built solution, whereas there are best practices And he says that's what he's looking for, the collaboration side of it. I'm not sure if anything do-it-yourself is what I want to touch when it comes to that real-time collaboration on the files. Just if you're like editing in the same within Davinci and two people have Davinci open at the same time, I think you're asking for versioning challenges. So it may be there's a separate step where you're even working on two different versions of the project, and then somehow you're merging them together on the other end. Next question.
Robert Sababari in Poland is asking, I run a 70 terabyte NAS in our studio. I need to archive 20 terabytes of data every year and remove that data permanently from the NAS. Any recommendations on how to archive 20 terabytes of data safely?
One thing that I would do is have a, you can actually, I'm not sure if it's a Synology Solutions, but I can only speak to that specific brand. You can set up a second NAS as a target to back up the first one, but instead of backing up all of the configurations and all of the different packages and things that are installed and backing up the OS, I try to back up just the files and folders, just the data structure. And then if you're doing that to a single drive, to two drives, so that you have some redundancy there, you can do that. If you're using it, but if it's archiving purposes, this is where I definitely am going to recommend that you stay away from the Synology hybrid RAID, only because it is specific to Synology. If Synology hybrid RAID is what you have your data formatted as, and you 10 years from now are trying to look at it and you don't have something that can read Synology hybrid RAID, you're out of luck. Whereas if you had something that was RAID 10 or RAID 6, that's more standardized. And then you can go ahead and open that up and not be dependent on one manufacturer to go and support it. Anytime I'm archiving, though, I'm always following the rules that there's got to be 3 copies of it. I try to have it on 2 different types of storage media, and one of them needs to be on offline, or I guess off-site is the better word for it. So that way, if there's any sort of disaster that strikes a physical location, I don't have an issue as part of my disaster recovery plan on how I get that stuff back. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I use Backblaze. I've been using it for quite a few years now, and it's really inexpensive. You can just upload an unlimited number of data from multiple hard drives without any problems. So I really like their service. In fact, actually, if you have a lot of data that you need to get up into the cloud pretty quickly, you can even mail them a drive of your own, and they will upload that to your cloud account for you as well. So that's a really great service that they provide. Another option too, and I know plenty of people that do that, including Steve Gibson, is if you want to archive the entire drive, if you had a 20 terabyte drive with data on it, a lot of people have fireproof safes, and you can put that drive in the safe if you want to protect it. Now, of course, you know, these drives don't last forever. So, you know, if you have a hard drive for 20 years stored, you know, in a safe and it hasn't been powered on in a long time, it may not work. So that's another thing. But definitely follow CJ's advice of having the data in 3 places, and definitely one of those should be in the cloud somewhere, whether it's Backblaze or some other cloud-based provider. AWS can get really expensive if you're having to pull data off of AWS, and all the time that can get very pricey. So there's a bunch of solutions out there.
I don't even mind not having a copy on the internet so much as so that it's in a different place. Like I have my end goal for having 2 different Synology boxes is that I can have one Synology box that sits at the office and another Synology box that sits at home, and they're mirrors for one another. So that way they're in 2 physical locations without necessarily needing to spend the money, which could get fairly pricey. You could be talking into the thousands of dollars a year to put it on a service like that C2 from Synology. I remember back when I was amassing a song collection when iTunes was first out. I just wanted to have every song on my iPod, but I was not a LimeWire kid. I was not a Napster kid. I was a rip CDs kind of person. And so I remember just going to my relatives' houses for a couple days, anybody that had a really good CD collection, and I would just sit there for hours and hours and hours and put all those CDs into the computer. And then when I looked at the amount of time that I had spent ripping all those CDs, I thought to myself, wow, this is before iTunes Match and streaming and all that. I thought, wow, if I lose this for any reason, I'm really cooked. And at that particular time in my life, having 50,000 songs was the most prized data that I had. So I remember I would once a year for about 5 years, and then technology advanced and I didn't need to do this anymore. But for 5 years, I actually burned dual-layer DVDs and mailed them to my mom's house because I wanted to make sure that that data was on, not only was it off-site, but it also was in a different storage medium. Because I'm like, by gosh, if we can't read hard drives in 100 years, somebody will find a DVD drive, and then I'll be okay. If for whatever reason nobody has SATA ports anymore, I can read a DVD. This is a typical teenager's logic in this, but hey, the foundation was there.
CJ, did you ever get into burning Blu-ray drives, or sorry, Blu-ray discs? Because they have a much better fault tolerance. They last a lot longer.
I didn't, but I also think by the time Blu-ray burners became affordable, Apple released the iTunes Match, which was like $25 a year, and they gave you like amnesty on anything that was any song that was in your library. If it also existed in iTunes, they upgraded you to the iTunes version of it for what it's worth, and now they're all in lossless. So like that was a nice day, but I stopped the insanity a little bit. And Pager, I wouldn't say, you had said in the chat, it sounds like Synology is the only NAS solution that should be used to trust it. I wouldn't say that at all. That's the one that I happen to have experience with, and we're a little bit light on panel today. And so that's the camp that you're hearing from. But there are definitely, as you get into enterprise network attached storage solutions, or some of the do-it-yourself ones, if you really know what you're doing, you can make something or buy something that's just as reliable, just as good. For a beginner like me, who's just getting into network-attached storage in the last 4 or 5 years, I was attracted to Synology just because it had a little, the edges weren't quite as hard if I tripped and cut myself on it. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. My backblaze service doesn't back up NAS, so I want a large, fast RAID for video editing that I can also access from network computers. Thoughts on 80 terabytes OWC Thunderbay 4 and pros, cons versus other local arrays?
The biggest thing that I would worry about, the biggest thing that I worry about with that much data locally is where are your bottlenecks? Is it what kind of NIC is on the back of it? Can I go 1 gigabit? Is it 10 gigabit? Do my switches support that? How fast are the drives that are in it? And also, what level of, what is the resolution of video that I'm editing? If you go and do a Blackmagic disk speed test on that, accessing it over the network, what frame rates and resolutions are going to be performant in that setup? Those are the kinds of considerations that I would go look at, whether it's Thunderbay 4 or whether it's a different local storage solution for how to put a bunch of data on the network that can get accessed by multiple computers. The biggest thing that I'm looking at are, what are my bottlenecks, what are my constraints, and what are my requirements for the kinds of projects that I'm going out there and making. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, for playing video audio projects from the NAS, would you need a Thunderbolt link, or would a 2.5 gigabit 10/10 gigabit per second link be enough?
I was actually looking at this today. I had some ProRes 422 1080 files that I wanted to just look at as a test. And I was able to, just for playback, I connected to it over Wi-Fi using my phone, and I hit play, and it played just fine. If you think about the amount of data throughput that you need, to play back a 1080p file or a 4K file, think about the connection that you have to the internet, your download connection, and think about how much data throughput a YouTube video uses. That's playback. But you're not getting anywhere near 2.5 gig or 10 gig links to see it. Now, if you're playing back within the project file and it's needing to buffer and read all of the original media very quickly, and you're dealing with ProRes files that are very large, then all of a sudden your buffers are going to go and fill up pretty quickly. And so that's when you need to be more worried about it. But again, just for playback of rendered files, I wouldn't be too worried about it. It's really when it gets into very, very high resolutions on constrained network connections that I get more worried. If it's anything that I'm trying to actively work on, I'm not playing back rendered media. I'm actually cutting. I'm moving things around. I'm adding effects, I'm adding titles, I'm trying to re-render, and all of a sudden that pipe is going to get filled up very quickly because there's a lot of concurrent operations that are happening there. And the other thing, and Ryan brings this up in the chat, is what is the box doing? Is it backing up to an external source? Is it downloading things from your cloud sync? If you're going to be using that network attached storage box as a place where you're going to pull media from to use in any sort of NLE, then you need to make sure that that's an appliance. It is a purpose-built thing that is only doing that, so that way you're not getting any curveballs. And if you're in a live event, if it's a stream, or if you're live on the ground, I'm not trusting any network anything. I want that to be locally on that computer, so that way I'm on that computer or on that playback device, so there's zero chance that any sort of latency or any sort of traffic is going to get in the way. Alexander?
Yeah, so just for my setup here, and this is just purely one example here, but for just playback, for playing back Apple ProRes encoded 422 files that are 1080p on just a pretty common 1 gig network connection, which is what I have here, I have zero problems playing back. It is butter smooth all the way through. So Douglas, you got to think about, well, what resolutions are you talking about? Because he didn't mention how the files are encoded and what resolutions are, obviously 8K or 12K raw files are different from, 1080p, H.264, H.265 for 422. There's a lot of factors to think about here.
And what are the drive speeds? I mean, you can have, even over a Thunderbolt connection, you can have a really fat pipe as the throughput or the I/O between the device and your computer. But if the drives can't produce enough speed to get that data out there, then that's going to be the constraint. That's going to be the bottleneck. So again, it's thinking really hard about what's the whole system doing. Think about even the RAID configuration. Different RAID configurations are going to have difference into, like, you can put it in RAID 0 and have, scary RAID, and you can have no fault tolerance, so that you have, if you have two 10 terabyte drives in RAID 0, you have 20 terabytes of storage. But if one of the drives fail, you lose the data on both of them, but it's going to be really fast. So if you have all of that data backed up somewhere else and speed is the key, then that's going to affect that's going to also affect your decision making. Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. Compare and contrast when to use network attached storage versus online storage.
Alexander?
Yeah, so this would be a situation of figuring out how quickly do you want to be able to access data. So locally is preferred if you need to edit off drives or if you need to have very, very quick access for read and write speeds. I use cloud-based solutions for long-term archival stuff. Like once I'm done with the actual project, it just gets archived and goes up to the cloud. And then I actually just, I use backblaze. I talked about that earlier. So basically, because of my limited storage, what I do is once I'm done with the project and it's fully synced up to backblaze, I just wipe the drive entirely. So I just get rid of all that data because I'm probably not going to need to access it again. And even if I did, I could just download a copy of it from Backblaze, and it's not going to take that long because my connection is very fast. So again, you got to think about what exactly are you trying to do, And if it's really speed, then you really want a local copy somewhere on your network.
I think we've heard on the show, even depending on the complexity or the size of the project, that some people will want to have it on the internal drive of the Mac because the read-write speeds are faster than if they had an NVMe RAID plugged in over Thunderbolt 4. And you're talking about a very fast local connection versus a moderately fast local connection in that case. It's all about what are your bit rates, what are the bit rates of the files that you're trying to use, and really what's your experience as you're, depending on the complexity of your projects, as you're working. If you feel that latency, if you feel that hesitation from the machine and that friction is getting in the way of you making the right creative decisions, then it's time to say, okay, what's the next fastest thing? And so when you set up your network attached storage, you're going to have a lot of decisions to make. How fast is the network that it's going on? How fast are the drives that I'm putting in? Is it you're hoping that you don't have any 5400 RPM drives, they're all 7200 or SSD, or if you need really fast NVMe. And then the next thing you do is figure out, well, how fast is the RAID configuration? RAID 5 and 6 might be slower than RAID 1, but you're going to have more fault tolerance there. Or RAID 10, you're going to have more fault tolerance in a 5 or a 6. So that's and how many drives are in there? Are you needing to read more of the data? Like a RAID 5 or 6 is going to have really good read speeds, but not as fast of write speeds because of the way that has to go in there. So those are all of the decisions that you're trying to make ahead of time. But then once you have that thing configured, you're going to go ahead and do your speed tests. Download Blackmagic Disk Speed Test. It's free, but that's going to go through and it's going to tell you at all the different resolutions and all the different frame rates what is the sort of reliability that you could expect. And then, now that you have all of that theoretical knowledge, we still have not even gotten to there, because we've always said theoretical knowledge by itself is almost more dangerous than no knowledge at all, because you think you know what you're doing. So now what you need to do is go ahead and say, I'm going to take my theoretical knowledge and my theory and my hypothesis on how I set this whole network attached storage situation up, and now I'm going to compare it to when I'm actually in the project. How do I make it work? How does it feel? And if it feels too slow and it's getting in the way of your creativity, unfortunately, you got to burn it all down and start over and say, okay, now when I'm going through all of those individual decisions along the way, I'm going to be thinking about speed every single time. Next question.
Timothy Turner in Eagle, Wisconsin asks, for those that have the Synology or QNAP, what do you use for a local backup, and did you test your local backup solution?
I use, on the Synology side, I use the Hyper Backup in a package manager. So if I have, let me just go back to I'm going to write Stream Deck a little nastygram here, because of all the days for it not to work, the day when we have light panel is the day. So here I am in my Synology. If I go into the little browser here for the apps, and then I click on Hyper Backup, you can see that it is backing up the entire, 4 terabytes that's on it right now from this to another Synology on the same network. You can also configure this to have it hit a Synology that's somewhere else, but this is a local backup. And I actually have it going to a single storage pool, a single drive on the other, so that I can, later I can see it. But what I like about this is that it says last successful backup was this morning at 7:57. The next one is scheduled for 3 a.m. If I go into the backup statistics, I can see how much of the usage on the source disk it's using, what's everything like on the monitor, how much usage is on the destination. And you can also set up alerts. If all of a sudden there's a lot of growth if you have versioning enabled, if a lot of growth has happened between versions, or a lot of usage happens all of a sudden, you can get an email notification, and then you can investigate if something seems off. And that, as part of that process, it does an integrity check. But you should always road test your backup solutions. A backup isn't a backup until you've made it back. So go ahead and make sure that you simulate a failure of one of your drives and see what repairing it's like. Simulate a failure of both of your drives and what's it like to restore from your backup. And if it all works, then you know that you've got something that's solid. Hopefully you don't have to do it with a full drive's worth of data, because that gets exciting. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, for critical broadcast playout, would you use a NAS or a more robust solution?
You can get, I'm sorry, go ahead, Alexander.
I'm not sure what a more robust solution would be other than some kind of NAS, because usually you have some kind of fault tolerance where you got a RAID array. And so if one drive, depending on the type of RAID array that you use, for example, RAID 6, you could even have 2 drives fail and you'd still be okay. I would probably trust a NAS on my network more than just a single USB hard drive, because that's a single point of USB failure. In fact, I've had more failures with just a single drive over USB or just even a USB cable dying. So I would much rather trust a network attached storage on my network for doing something like that.
And if it's specifically for backing up things that you would play out and bringing them onto a local machine, like bringing them into an EVS, then okay, that's fine. But when you say robust, I'm thinking about speed, and Mickey even brings up in the chat, for broadcast, purpose-built solutions such as EVS or FastServe with its own array or served from a SAN is used. Now, that's an important distinction. If you have a SAN, a storage area network, versus a network attached storage, it's a little bit different. And usually a SAN it doesn't have an OS running on it. It's just truly you're addressing block storage that's somewhere on the network. And that's more of an enterprise solution that's more purpose-built. But when you talk about then, the ultimate cost being failure for anything that's live, reliability is number one. So that's why those EVS systems exist, and why they are able to charge so much money is because of how robust and how reliable they are. Go ahead. Next question.
Roz Humphreys in Comox, British Columbia, Canada asks, any thoughts on requirements to edit direct to the network attached storage? Thanks.
Alexander?
I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but again, we got to think about calculating bandwidth requirements. What does the project require? Are you working with 1080p? Is it 4K? What's the file encoded at? Are you working with raw Blackmagic data? Those are massive, massive files. Are you doing multiple streams of 8K? There are a lot of factors here. To be more future foolproof, you'd probably want to, and this is where it can get expensive, but you want to look at something with at least a 10 gig connection. Now, the thing with that is that not only do you have to have a network attached storage device that supports 10 gigs, but now your entire infrastructure needs to support it. That includes the network card on all the computers that you're using. That includes all the switches and every single thing in between. The cabling has to have the right bandwidth. I mean, there's everything. So if you're going to do it from scratch, obviously think about what's required and where you want to go in the future, and allow yourself some buffer by getting something that will support that kind of bandwidth so you can edit bigger projects.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, has anyone ever used Syncthing or similar solutions to mirror network attached storages across the internet?
The only ones that I've used to mirror them over the internet have been the ones that are built into Synology, and I believe that the Hyper Backup does that over the internet. If not, there's a different package that allows two that are remote from one another to talk. Synology has on the back end a service called Quick Connect that allows you to remotely access that, so that once those two can see each other, they will mirror. Alternatively, if you were just trying to mirror the data that's on it, theoretically you could configure, if it was just serving as a cloud mirror, both NAS devices to have the same authentication and the same hookups to both, or to both NAS appliances. But the bigger thing, and the last thing is you can also export your configuration file from one and then load it as the configuration on the file on the other. So that way, if all it's doing is being a cloud mirror, it can suck right down. But I will definitely look into Syncthing because I haven't seen that, and I'm always interested in playing with stuff and seeing how it works. So that's NAS 1.0. Looks like we made it. There was so much excitement and so many questions about this topic. I really think it would be great to bring in folks like Jason, folks like Jeff Keithley to do a 2.0. This is kind of the intro on it, but kind of a basic. Next, we can take it to a subject and really talk to how are we really using it in the field, in production, whether it's in live or whether it's in editing. I would love to hear from more people who are using it for collaboration. And as you scale on different areas, or as you scale to different levels of production, what are the considerations as you get outside of just a hobbyist environment and into the production environment? But that's the NAS Basic for today. We've got a couple thank yous to go around. Thank you, first of all, for panelists in the first hour, and thanks to Alexander for hanging around in the second hour. We thought it was tough now. Just you wait. Nobody wants to hear me blather on completely by myself for multiple hours at a time. But everybody who's still hanging out, I appreciate that you did. Also, thank you to our back-end crew, helping everyone get in, helping us look and sound good, cutting the show, getting up early, staying up late to welcome us in, making sure that all of our connections are good, and also all of the planning that goes around on the back end for these second hours, getting them into the schedule, and when we have guests, prepping them. I mean, there's just a tremendous volunteer effort, and there's no shortage of gratitude from me because you make my job a million times easier. Also, thank you to the producers with questions. Also in the first and second hour, keeping us busy. I have a lot of homework now that I need to do because there are a couple brands and a couple of websites that I'd never heard of before. And I wouldn't have even known to look for them if it wasn't for you. And that's the magic of this community, is that we're all smarter as a result of each other's input, whether that's here on the panel or out in the questions. And we also run on generosity. So if you like what you're seeing, you'd like to see more, consider supporting us at officehours.global/donate. Tlaloc Traversal today, that's 86,000 miles, 138,000 kilometers, and 680 million bananas for scale. We'll see you in after hours.
Be right back. Got to rebuild my entire network. Replace all my computers with 10 gig computers.
It's expensive. And now all of a sudden I have to have I have bins of, these are my Cat 5s and these are my Cat 6s, and is that switch going to work? And
yeah, I'm going to need at least 10 grand to do it over.
So far, so good with the TrendNet switches, though. Courtney said that he had some positive experience with those, and I was able to put in about 4 of them here in the house. And so far, everything's working well. I get, like 2 gigs to every computer, and holy smokes. But thanks, Alexander. Appreciate you hanging in there.
That was fun. Thank you.
How bad was the dog?
I didn't hear any dog.